Hi. My wife's grandfather, so my kid's great-grandfather, built this top way back when, and it had some nice ideas in it, and I'd like to remake it. It seemed like a nice wood-turning project to do. So it's a simple wood-turn top and then a simple wood-turn handle with some holes drilled in it and a string. So let's get started. I'll start by making the body of the top. I'm going to make a piece that's made out of 4 sticks, and it's 2 pieces of walnut and 2 pieces of cherry. They're glued together to make a checkerboard pattern if you take a section through the piece. So I need to make 4 pieces that are all exactly the same thickness and smooth enough to make glue joints between the 4 pieces. I'll glue a piece of walnut to a piece of cherry and the other piece of walnut to a piece of cherry. Then I'll flatten a face on each of those and glue those together to make a piece that has a section as a square. That's a checkerboard pattern of the dark walnut and the light cherry. And then I'll measure the original top. I really should come clean and mention that I'm actually making this for a whistle that I'm working on. The plan was always to use the end of this piece for the body of the top. I'll drill a hole where the wood types intersect for my screw chuck, and then I can mount it on the lathe very securely and very simply, and I'll have a lot of room to work around the piece. The first thing I'll do on the lathe is turn the square piece into a cylinder. Then I'll start making the shape of the top. I'll use a bowl gouge to do the rough work, and then I'll use a scraper to get to the final shape. I can find the shape of the top in this piece of wood. The original was a straightforward cone, and I like to put a little bit of a curve on the bottom side of the top. Just gives it a little bit nicer shape. I'm not working from a pattern here or anything. I'm just looking at it and looking at what seems to be right. Now it's a little bit too long, so I'm going to cut off the top section with my parting tool, and that'll give me a nice flat top. I'm not going to cut this off all the way because I'd hit the steel screw from the screw chuck. So I'll get it most of the way, and then I'll sand it and get it all finished. And then I'll just sand off the little nubbin at the top where the screw chuck went in. I don't have the tools to hold it the other way around, so I'm just going to hand sand the top. Figure it's just perfectly flat. The next thing I need to make is the handle and the axle. I'll start with a piece of walnut and turn it into a cylinder for the handle. Almost there. Now I've turned the cylinder around, and I'm going to drill a shallow hole at one end so I can really hold it well. Then I'll just find the shape of the handle. I need a bulge at one end to hold the axle for the top and the string as it gets wound around that axle. Now the problem I had at this point was how to clean up the end where the tailstock held the spindle. So I just used my hand as a steady rest and just sanded and sanded and sanded until I got the shape in. Here I'm drilling out the hole that'll make the housing for the string to wrap around the top's spindle. Then I'll sand each side of the bulge to give a flat surface and to get rid of some of that mass that I don't need. Now I can drill the hole for the spindle for the top. Now I'll make the spindle. This is a little bit like taking a whole log to make a pencil. I really have to cut this down. Now that I'm close, I'll find the hole that I used for the screw chuck, and I can turn the spindle down to fit that hole. That hole that I drilled can be used twice. Now my calipers fit over that piece, so it should be pretty close. Now I'll check the hole, and it seems to fit. Now the task is to get a cylinder and not a cone. So I'll get it pretty close. And it's wood, so it doesn't have to be perfect. A little sanding. Now I'm going to glue the top onto the spindle. I can use my dial indicator to see how straight the top is on the spindle, and I've got it to within about 4/1000ths of an inch, which for wood turning I think is going to be just fine. Now I'll cut off the spindle, and I want it a little bit longer than where it's going to fit into the handle. The hole for the string on the spindle, I noticed, is not centered in the bigger hole in the handle. It's actually closer to the top. I think this may help hold the top in place while you're pulling the string. I got it all together and I realized it was hard to hold the string, and what it needed was a little handle at the end of the string that you could pull on. I didn't really know what this should be, so I started with a cigar shape, or something that would look like a little pull on a dresser or something. But then I realized that you probably wanted spots for your two fingers, carved two concave shapes, and then a spot for the string in the center. And that gave this shape, which I liked because I hadn't seen it before and it wasn't a preconceived thought of what it should be. It just, that's what made sense. And I drill a hole for the string. And we put it all together. And it seems to work.